Shabbat Shalom.
In Beshalach, the mighty hand of HaShem delivers the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. The Egyptian army, whose king had ordered that the Israelite baby boys be cast into the Nile, meet the same fate and perish in the Sea of Reeds, while the Israelites walk on dry land after the Sea of Reeds is split. HaShem sends manna from heaven for 40 years to provide sustenance to his chosen people as they walk through the wilderness. All the while, the clothes on their backs did not wear out, nor did the sandals on their feet. We see the first Shabbat was observed with a double portion, what we would use today as two challot. The exodus of Egypt has not ended, and we can see that our story is in continuation of the story of our ancestors. Torah tells us that when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although it was nearer, for God said the people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people round about by way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. That's Exodus 13:17. The Israelites froze in terror when they thought they were surrounded on one side by the Egyptians and the other side by the Sea of Reeds. Egypt is not only the geographic location of our ancestors' bondage. Egypt is also a psychological state that could cause a person to relent, submit, bend the knee, and accept defeat from adversity, storms, and men. The Israelites did not embrace their identity as Hashem's chosen people because they still carried with them the slave mentality that was gnawing at their souls. Hashem knew that the sight of war and adversity would cause the Israelites to want to return to Egypt because slavery was all they knew. And so in his loving kindness, Adonai went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead the way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so they could travel both day and night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never departed from the people. That's Exodus 13:21-22. Despite walking in the presence of Hashem, the Israelites felt great fear. They cried out. They contemplated surrender, preferring a life of slavery under the Egyptians rather than death in the wilderness as free men. The unknown, the uncertain, it was terrifying. And the Israelites had left Egypt, but only physically. In truth, they were not free. I want to tell you a little parable. A museum hired a veteran and his dog to guard the premises during the late night hours. Now, the museum had a curious room. It was the room of mirrors. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, and the doors were full of mirror panels. During their shift, the veteran had to step away and commanded the dog to stay on guard. A few minutes after the veteran walked away, the dog started to wander and entered into the mirrored room. He froze in surprise when he saw that he was surrounded on all sides by a pack of dogs. The dog bared his teeth to warn the pack of dogs to step back. Instead, the dogs bared their teeth as well. The dog became frightened. He was outnumbered. He barked frantically, and so did every single dog in the pack. As each reflection imitated the dog barked louder. The dog decided its only chance at survival would be to charge at the dogs. And as he charged, so did every dog in the pack. After half an hour of fighting himself, the dog became exceedingly tired and passed out. And when the veteran returned to his post and saw that the dog did not remain on guard, he searched the museum. He found his dog exhausted, surrounded by what appeared to be a pack of defeated dogs. The veteran immediately understood what had happened and carried the dog away. The moral is that the world is a mirror. And when we have not formed a firm foundation in HaShem, and we look into this mirror, our perception of reality can become distorted. Objects in the mirror are closer or farther than appear, bigger or smaller than they are. They may even appear upside down. We can be deceived by what we see, which allows our insecurities to overwhelm and defeat us. Sometimes the reflection in the mirror is our thoughts and feelings. the internal Egypt that keeps us in bondage. It tells us that we can't, and we begin to fight ourselves. The dog in the parable did not recognize his reflection in the mirror. Just like the Israelites could not see past their adversities. They were concerned with preserving their lives and their material needs. The Israelites could not believe that the King of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, would provide, much less fight for them. The Israelites did not mentally leave Egypt, and so they were already back in Egypt. Like our ancestors, we too return to Egypt. We too fight ourselves. We too run from our identity, and we lean on our own capacity and what we see. When we are paralyzed in our Egypt, we do not see that the sea of reed was split so that we can walk on dry land. Instead, we dwell on the horror from which we are running. When we are paralyzed in our Egypt, we do not see that HaShem has commanded his angel to follow behind us and cast a spell upon the night so that the army of Egypt could not come near us. Instead, we dwell on the darkness. That's Exodus 14:20. How do we defeat our Egypt? We must see ourselves as personally having left Egypt, always remembering that leaving Egypt is not only a historic event, it is our current reality. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote that as Jews, we live with the past, not in it, with our eyes firmly turned toward the future. Leaving Egypt is not a one-time event. We must decide to leave Egypt every day, every moment. We must remain conscious of our bondage, constraints, limitations. What is our Mitzrayim? Who is our Mitzrayim? I want to give you another little parable, and it illustrates how I have decided to leave my Egypt every morning after I recite Nomoda Ani. And yes, this is an everyday commitment that you make to yourself. A father takes his son into the forest, blindfolds him and leaves him alone. The boy is required to sit on a stump the whole night and not remove the blindfold until the rays of the morning sun shine through. He cannot cry out for help to anyone. Once he survives the night, he is a man. He cannot tell the other boys of this experience because each boy must come into manhood on his own. Naturally, the boy is terrified. He can hear all kinds of noises. Wild beasts must be around him, and maybe even some humans will do him harm. The wind blew the grass and the earth and shook his stump, but he sat stoically, never removing the blindfold. It would be the only way that he could become a man. Finally, after a horrific night, the sun appeared and he removed his blindfold. It was then that he discovered his father sitting on the stump next to him. He had been at watch the entire night, protecting his son from harm. The moral is that even when we don't know it, even when we can't see him or hear him, God is sitting on the stump beside us. In this Parashah, Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of Adonai, which he will perform for you today. You have seen the Egyptians today, but you will never see them again ever." Exodus 14:13. When we surrender and close our eyes to see through his eyes, then we are freed of our Egypt. It is a personal decision that we have to make. It is a daily decision that we have to make. Because we're not all the same, we're so different, maybe my approach won't fit you. So let's try to find the answers in Torah. And I have 3 ways. Number 1, remember that when you walk out of your Egypt, you're walking with HaShem in your armed up. In Exodus 13:18, it tells us, "Now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt." Every time that we recite the Shema, and we say, "Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Vayed," we're acknowledging that God is one, that his kingdom is forever and ever, that there is no Egypt bigger than our God. We must practice that and believe it. Number 2, prayer. The Israelites cried out to HaShem, and he heard their cries. In Exodus 2:23-25, we read that a long time after that, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from the bondage rose up to God. God heard their moaning, and God remembered the covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. When you come before HaShem with a humbled heart, your prayers reach his throne, and he inclines his ears. And number 3, trust and kalimah. Walk ahead knowing that you have the King of the universe watching your back, and he will never fail you nor leave you. In Exodus 14:19-20, it says, the messenger of God, who had been going ahead of the Israelite army, now moved and followed behind them. And the pillar of cloud shifted from in front of them and took up a place behind them. And it came between the army of the Egyptians and the army of Israel. Thus there was a cloud with the darkness, and it cast a spell upon the night, so that the one could not come near the other all through the night. Make a commitment to yourself every morning after your prayers. Remind yourself that HaShem does not want us to return to Egypt. And we read that it's implied in Deuteronomy 17:16, where it says, only he should not multiply horses for himself or make the people return to Egypt to multiply horses, because Adonai has said to you, you must never go back that way again. Let's move forward. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.